All right, welcome everyone to Tech Elevator Live. Today we are going to be talking about how to build your first web page using HTML and CSS. We're just going to give it a couple minutes here and let everybody join the live stream. But as we're doing that, please go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know where you're joining us from and if you have any experience at all building web pages. I'd love to see where everybody's kind of joining us from today, what your experience level is. Hey, buddy. Oh, there's Matt. Hello, Matt. How are you doing today? I know where you're from. I know what your experience level is. Thanks for joining us. Okay, again, we got a nice group of people in here, so please let me know where you're joining us from and if you have any experience building web pages. All right, Liz here, CLE West Side. All right, West Side of Cleveland. Thanks, Liz, for joining us. Liz said that I've done some HTML on WordPress. Cool. That's good to know. You're probably ahead of the curve. WordPress can be a little tricky for anyone, let alone beginners, so that's good to see. Hi, learned HTML way before HTML4, looking to learn more current stuff. All right, that's good to know. That same user also said I've tweaked HTML inside SharePoint web pages. So again, just like WordPress and SharePoint, when you get in there and have to really start tweaking stuff, it can be a little bit difficult because those content management systems, push a lot of content in there, and a lot of that can make it a little bit more confusing. So if you've already done that, you're kind of ahead of the curve. Here's another one, Cleveland area as well. Yes, Beth. So I was going to say this in a minute, but one of our instructors, Beth Campbell, is in the chat today with us, and she's going to be helping answer any questions you might have. So thank you, Beth, for joining us. CLE, go Bucks. Have experience building pretty decent with HTML and CSS. Want to learn some JavaScript. So that's good to know. Just to want to be upfront with you today, we're not going to get into any JavaScript. If that's something you're interested, though, again, this is hopefully going to become a weekly thing, and I would definitely love to jump into some JavaScript. Cameron, hello, Cameron. Thanks for joining us. Hey, brother. Thanks for putting this on. Excited to learn. Cool. Glad you're here, Cameron. Did a front-end non-bootcamp to be able to work for me to tweak a simple portfolio myself. So, okay, great. Simple portfolio, that is definitely somewhere to start with basic HTML and CSS. So I hope you're going to learn something good here today. Go this one. Watching from CLE, some experience with HTML, but it was years ago, but I'm excited to learn. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. Complete newbie looking to gain some new skills. So that's great. As we'll get into today, even if you're not looking to get into a career in software development, just learning coding can open up a whole lot of opportunities. So Bats LM, located in the Columbus, Ohio area. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Anthony from Cleveland, still a beginner and learning the basics. Great. This is definitely right up that alley, Anthony. So thank you for joining us. James from Cleveland and now working with WordPress to create websites. Need to learn HTML and CSS where content managers may be limited. That's awesome. That's definitely a great skill to have when it comes to WordPress. So you can kind of put these layouts together and then give them to the people that are managing content. So cool. We have a really great crowd. I want to go ahead and thank you guys all for showing up today. So let's just jump into it. What is Tech Elevator Live? So Tech Elevator Live is our chance to give some live coding sessions and to give you an insight into what it's like to learn how to code. So these are beginning focused and they're presented by Tech Elevator. So who are we? We are a full stack coding bootcamp, and it's our mission to help students with diverse backgrounds to become software developers. And we do this through an intense 14-week bootcamp where we teach you how to code and to build the necessary career readiness skills and career connections through our nationally recognized pathway program. So that's a little bit about Tech Elevator. You can go over to techelevator.com and learn a little bit more about us if you're interested in that. Who am I? So I am a curriculum developer with Tech Elevator, and it's really our job as curriculum developers to make sure that our students are learning the latest technologies and really working with our hiring partners to figure out what employers are looking for. Because not only do we want you to learn how to code, but we ultimately want you to get a job. So I've been a software developer for over 20 years now, and I really love the teaching aspect of really helping other people do something that I'm very passionate about. And software has been a part of my whole life, and I'm really excited to be in a position to really help others. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is an intro to HTML and CSS for web development. We have some ideas of where these live sessions can go, but we'd also like to hear from you. So please let us know in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me personally. My email address is dan@techelevator.com. If there's something you'd like to see in a live stream, let us know. So what is the purpose of today's live stream? So we're going to look at what is web development. We're going to learn the basics of HTML and CSS. We're actually going to build something. We're going to build a web page for my friend Ethan's landscaping business, although it's going to be very basic, but I think it'll give you a little bit of insight what it takes to build a web page. And so these live sessions are really meant to be a collaboration. This isn't a presentation. This isn't a conference talk. This is a collaboration between us and you. And what I want to do is just write some code today, talk about some things, and really answer your questions, because you could go out and watch, read all the articles you want. You can watch YouTube videos, but unless you really have someone to ask questions to, it's easy to get stuck in the mud and not know what to do next. And so we're hopefully that bridge for you to really understand not only how to code, but what's next. Like, how do I keep going with this if this is something I'm interested in? Liz here, online programs, or must we go downtown? Yeah, so Beth put some links in there. Go ahead and contact us there. And just go ahead and ask your questions. Like I said, Beth is in the chat moderating. She'll go ahead and answer those questions, and I'll try to keep peeking over at them as well. So let me go ahead and switch over to my laptop and let's jump into this. So before we get into a little bit of WellBrain, does the camera look a little bit laggy to me? Yeah, that's probably not you. But hopefully I'm gonna stay off in this little circle now, and maybe it won't be as laggy, and we'll share a lot more screens. So sorry if that's annoying. I think it has to do with everyone being home right now and just the mass consumption of Netflix and Disney Plus and everything that's going on. So sorry about that. So a little bit about web development. There are tons of different reasons that you would want to learn how to code. And the one that we're going to look at today is for building web pages for the web. We use the web every day. There may be different reasons that you want to build web pages, or there may be different reasons that you want to learn how to code. So some reasons that you may want to learn how to code are to maybe change careers. Maybe you are looking to get into software development. Software developers are definitely in high demand right now and always. Learning how to code can also improve your problem solving skills. That's one thing we always find with anyone to coding, whether you've been doing it for a year or 20 years, it's constantly improving those problem solving skills. Maybe you have a side hustle and you want to start a new business. This is, learning how to code can definitely help in that area. Maybe you're starting a charity and you want to create a website or create some information out there. Maybe you just want to help your children understand how to learn how to code, or help a friend out. Maybe you just want to do this for fun. There are a lot of great reasons to get into coding. But one we're going to look at today is web development. And so again, as I mentioned, we use the web every day. Building for the web is exciting because one of the things I love about web development is it's very real and very fast. Like, you can build something and see your work out on the web right away. Like, it doesn't take long. And it's really cool, like, to be able to, like, something tangible, like you can go show someone like, hey, I did this. So again, there's a lot of great reasons to go ahead and build for the web. So let's talk about web development tools. So some of the barrier to entry for programmers is like having to set up all these different tools. What I'm excited about today is you don't have to set anything up. All you're going to need is a web browser, and you can actually follow along with me. In a future live session, if you're interested, we can go into like how to set up your local computer to work on any projects that you want to work on locally, and then how we can actually take that project and push it up to the web for everyone else to see. But today, all we need is a browser. So whatever your favorite browser is, I'm using Chrome today. You can use Firefox, Safari, Edge, I guess. Whatever you're into as far as web browsers go, that is going to be all you need today. We're going to use this really cool tool called CodePen. And CodePen, I'm going to go ahead and take a walkthrough of that. So I'm going to actually switch my camera off so we can just go to my laptop. So I'm going to check the comments here. Looks like everything's okay. And I'm going to go and I'm going to close this. That's techelevator.com if you want to learn more. But I'm going to talk to you about CodePen, because CodePen is what we're going to use today. So if you're sitting at your computer and you want to go ahead and do this now, you can. Or you can go ahead and do this later. There'll be a replay of this, so you can go ahead and check that out. But you're going to go to codepen.io and sign up for a free account. We have no affiliation with CodePen, but I think it's a great tool. And what it allows us to do is write some web pages right in the web browser. So we don't need to set up that local development environment. And like I said, that can always be tricky. And this really gives us a nice place to do it. So I'm going to do what's called a new pen, which is just, I'm going to create a new web page. And I'm going to walk you around CodePen just really quickly so you understand what this tool is. And then we will jump right into creating some HTML. So I'm going to come up here. This is my account. I'm going to create a new pen. And when I create a new pen, I'm presented with this layout. So we are talking about building a web page. When we talk about building web pages and websites, the tools that we're using to build those are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, as I mentioned before, we're not going to jump into JavaScript today, but we will talk about HTML and CSS. So if you have never worked with HTML or CSS, don't worry about it. We're going to jump into that. Here in the upper left-hand corner is a title for the pen. So if I wanted to go ahead and type this basics of HTML and hit enter. That's going to go ahead and save that. And now I have a pen that I can start to work with. I can also go ahead and share this out. So I'm going to hit save. And if I go ahead and paste this in, I think you should be able to go ahead and view this along with me. Or again, you can just watch as we are going along. So again, what this allows us to do is just build a web page right here in the browser without setting up our local environment. So what I'm going to do is actually drag this a little bit over so we can see more of the HTML and more of the web page. So we're going to start with HTML, the basics of HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and any web page that you go to has been created using HTML. Now, there are a bunch of different programming languages that can ultimately render HTML, but at the heart of it all, the web is built on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so HTML is this markup language that browsers can now interpret. So when you visit a web page in a browser like techelevator.com, and the browser now displays all of this information to you, like pictures and text and lists. And sorry about that. Because of my live stream, everything is slowed down a little. And as it comes up, so the browser is interpreting markup HTML, and it's displaying this to you. So we have things like images and text and more images and a whole bunch of information that's going on. And this was all built using HTML. One thing you can do is right click on a web page and go into view page source. And you can see a whole bunch of gobbledygook. There's a lot of things going on here. Some of these pages that you look at on the internet are going to be more complicated than others. Some, like this one, is using a content management system to manage the content. So you see a lot more things going on. But at the heart of it all, you'll see these things like head and body and div and a and span. And so these are all HTML tags. And these are a way for the browser to interpret what content we want to go ahead and display on our web page. So we could come in here and just start typing some text without any markup, without any HTML, and it'll display in the browser just fine. But this is not the preferred method. We are going to use HTML to really describe our document on how we want the structure of our document to look like. So when it comes to a web page, the structure of how everything is kind of created in the web browser is done through HTML. Now, HTML alone through the browser will give you some default styles, but it doesn't make it look really nice. In fact, as we go through this, we'll start to see that by default, all this HTML looks pretty bland and boring. Where the nice looking UIs come from, or the styles, is CSS. And CSS really gives us that look and feel of how a web page is presented to the users. So we're going to start with HTML, and we're going to start with the basics of HTML. So HTML basically has a start tag and an end tag, and we're going to go through all these different tags, but it starts with the less than h1, the name of the tag that we're going to use, and then the greater than sign. And then anything in between is the content. So I may have hello HTML, and then I have what's known as an end tag. Whoops, I already did that wrong. So we have an h1 HTML tag, and then we have some content in between. And as you see, that made it much bigger. So we're going to go through and look at all the different tags that we can create, but you will see something like this. You'll also see tags that may be self-closing. So what that means is there's not a end tag like there is with the h1 here. This is just self-closing, meaning there's no content in between here, so we don't need the end tag like we did above. And you'll also see examples of HTML where we have tags mixed in, embedded in each other. So we have a paragraph tag, and we have a line break tag in here as well, and then the ending tag here. So this is kind of how HTML tags are created, but it'll make more sense once we really start to go through all of the different tags that you can create. So that's an HTML tag at its core. There's also HTML attributes. So when we have a tag like an image tag, there are different attributes that we can supply to that tag. So we can say, hey, there is a source, which is basically going to be where that image is located. So I want to put an image on my page. This src attribute tells us where that image is located. Then there can be other attributes like width. There could be things like class, and etc. So attributes are inside the tag, and they usually follow a name, an equal sign, and then parentheses to define the value of that particular property. So that's a little bit about HTML tags. I want to talk a little bit about an HTML page structure. So I'm going to copy some code and paste it in here. And if you're developing, if you start writing code on your local machine, and if some of you, it sounds like you have done this before. If you haven't, don't worry. Some of this, the very base structure of an HTML page looks like this. You have a doc type, you have an HTML tag, which says, hey, this is an HTML document. You have a head, which is none of the content that you will see displayed on the page. It's things like this up here, the page title of the tab that you're seeing. So this would be Basics of HTML. That would go in a title tag in here. And then you have this body tag. And this is where all of the content goes. And what CodePen is doing for us is basically giving us that body tag. So anything that we type in here is going to go in the body. I expanded the YouTube window to full screen. I can't read what he's typing. The red against black for me is unreadable. No problem. Let me see if I can change this up. Let's go into settings, and should be a way to sorry, just stick with me 1 second. So first off, I'm going to bump this screen size up a little. And I know there is a way to, I think I have dark mode on. All of it's blurry though, just so you know. Upgrade support documentation settings. All right, let's see if we can find something that's a little bit more. Code. Okay, so let's see if that looks a little bit better. Is there a syntax highlighting area that work? Maybe it's, oh, don't worry about that. Again, this is meant to be collaborative. If you can't see something, I'd like to know about it. So hopefully this works out a little bit better. So let me just go ahead and type in hello world, although I don't like that gray. Let me know if you guys can see that okay. Okay, I'm gonna just keep moving forward. If anyone has any feedback, please let me know. Okay, so we're gonna go through and start talking about some of the most common HTML tags that you can use. So these are all the HTML tags that we're going to talk about today are kind of the building blocks of your application. So you're not going to remember all these at first, but as you start to build different pages, you'll start remembering like, oh yeah, I need that here, this tag or that tag. And all these different tags are going to start to make up our different web pages and our different websites. So the first thing that we're starting with here is the headings. So we have these headings, and this H1 just stands for heading 1. And so if we go ahead and create a few of these, there's actually 6 different headings. So if I go ahead and, whoops, let me put that back. So I'll go ahead and copy this. And if we change this to an H3, 4, 5, and 6, you can see that the browser interprets that. So we have some different headings here, and these are a way to kind of emphasize a section. These are section headings. And so as you can see, we start out really big, and then we get smaller and smaller and smaller. And remember before I told you that HTML tags aren't really used for the style or the presentation of something. That's what CSS is for. HTML really just kind of defines our structure of our web page. But the reason that these different headings have different sizes is the browser actually has some default styles. So I don't know if you know this, but if you use something like Chrome, you can right click and go to inspect, and it brings up these tools that we web developers use to really take a look at what's going on in our web pages and view different things. And so one of the things that we can do is we can come over here, and I know this is probably going to be a little hard to see, but if we look at this H1 tag, we can see that it has a font size of 2 EM. So it's just a unit of measurement that we use. And if we look at the H2, we can see that this is a font size of 1.5. So even though we aren't defining any CSS yet, the browser has defined some predefined styles for us, which gives these different headings a different font size for each of them. So the heading tags are the first one we looked at. Now, if you wanted to display some text, one thing that you can use is a paragraph tag. So a P tag with some content in there. So I'm going to put some placeholder text in here. You may see this in different examples as you're going through web development and trying to learn how to code. But we have something called lorem ipsum text, and I can just generate some here in CodePen. And that's just some placeholder text to give us an idea of what we want to do on this page. So we have a paragraph tag, and then inside that tag is the content. So you can see now we're starting to develop some content for our page. We have different headings, we have a paragraph tag, and there's some other things that we can do inside of here. So let's say that we wanted to really emphasize or put some italics on these first 2 words. So we can use another tag called emphasis, which is going to give us some italics. So as we do that, you can see the first, is that not saving? Don't know what's going on there, but that should not be doing that. I wonder why that's coming up like that. Okay, so we can use this to put some italics on there. We can also do, use another tag called strong to go ahead, and by default in the browser, this makes this bold. So we can come in here and make this last one bold. So again, this is just an example of being able to embed some tags within other tags. And you'll see this a lot as you start creating web pages. So that is emphasis and strong. We also have the idea of a block quote. So let's just say that I wanted to put a quote on here and I wanted to cite someone. So let's just say block quote. And I'm going to go ahead and cite Tech Elevator on this. This came from www.techelevator.com. And inside this block quote, I'm going to go ahead and put some more placeholder text. So now, by default, you'll see that there is some default styling within the browser that kind of pushes this and gives it a margin and makes it stand out a little bit. So that's a way that we can go ahead and like create a quote on our page. So let's take a look at some other things. Some other things that we might want to do is create a list of things. So we can come in here and say, I want to learn to code. And we can create lists. So we have two types of lists that we're going to talk about today, and that's an unordered list, so that's why it's UL, and an ordered list, which is OL. And so the unordered list, inside of the unordered list, we can create a bunch of list items. So a list item is a li tag. And this, again, we're creating an unordered list, and inside here we're going to create a bunch of items. So if I want to learn how to code, I need HTML, I need CSS, and I need JavaScript. So as you can see, what's going on here is in the browser, we see three items here. So we have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And by default, they have some styling, which gives them this round disk next to it. It's like a bullet point. And so this is a nice way to go ahead and create this list. And then we can use this list to go ahead and style it however we want. So we'll end up looking at a way that we can use CSS to target that list and make it look however we want it to. So if you're ever on a website and you see some like navigation at the top, a lot of the times this is using a list. It doesn't look like this, but we use CSS to go ahead and style it out. So maybe it's laid out in a row for you right at the top of a web page. So that's a unordered list, but we also have a ordered list. So if I just go ahead and copy this and change this to an ordered list, you'll see those dots change to numbers. So now we have a specific order to these lists. So we have the numbers 1, 2, and 3. Somebody mentioned, I don't think I do. Okay, just reading through the comments here. Let me know if you have any questions about anything that we're doing so far. So we've looked at lists here. Now what I want to cover is just some other HTML tags you might come across. So if we wanted to put a rule on the page, a horizontal rule, we can use the tag HR. So again, this is one of those self-closing tags. So we don't have any content in between this tag. So we just use an HR tag, and that is going to put a rule across the page. You can see this horizontal rule here. And again, we could go ahead and style this later. So I hope what's coming across here is that by adding all of this HTML, we're really defining the content that goes on the page and not really how it looks. HTML by itself is pretty ugly. Again, we'll use CSS to really make this look pretty. The next thing I want to look at is a table. So we use a table for tabular data. We might have used a table. So I've been doing this for 20 years. We used to use tables for everything. Tables were a way to not only create tabular data, but to use for layout as well. We did all kinds of hacks back in the day. So I guess what this old guy is telling you is that be lucky that you're not 20 years ago, because it was a lot harder to create layouts today, or layouts than it is today. So the point with this is only use tables for tabular data. When you want to get into laying out items on your page, we're going to use CSS stuff for that. So I'm going to create a new table here. And inside that table, we're going to have something called a T-head. And this is just saying, hey, the header of this table is going to have a row. And inside this row, we're going to have some headings. We want to display a first name. We want to display a last name, and we want to display and email address. So as you can see, this table now consists of some headings. So if you've ever worked with anything like Excel, you'll notice that like on the first row, you'd probably put some column headings. And this is what we're doing here with this table. So now what we can do is say, here's our body of our table. So these are going to be all the rows of data. And so I can say, I want my name to be Dan, my last name, and my email address. And that is our row of data. And so what I'll do is I'll just copy that a couple of times just so you can see it all together. And now we have this table with some headings. So first name, last name, email address. And now we have 3 different rows of data. Again, looks pretty bland like that, but you can do some really cool things with CSS to really make this look nice when you're presenting data to someone. You can do things like color the backgrounds, or you can do like striped zebra rows where maybe the first and the third row have like a light gray background, so it's easier to distinguish between rows. There are so many things that you can do with all of these different HTML tags as far as styling them up. But that's what a default table would look like. Okay, next I want to talk about a few things, links, images, and line breaks. So let's talk about links. So if you've ever been on a web page and there's a link that you click on, whether it's a menu item at the top that links to somewhere in that same site, or maybe there's a link that links to somewhere else on the internet. This is kind of how the web is built, right? We're constantly trying to push to another page or push to another asset. So the way that we do that in HTML is by using an anchor tag. So in an anchor, there is an href, which is basically where is this link going to take me? So maybe I'm going to go ahead and put techelevator.com. And then what's inside of the tag here is going to be what is displayed on the page. So visit Tech Elevator. So again, we talked about this earlier, but hopefully it's making a little bit more sense now. This anchor is the tag. So A is the tag. Inside of that tag, we have this thing called an attribute. So all tags have attributes, different attributes. And for the anchor tag, one of those attributes is the href attribute. And that'll, again, tell us where to go. So another thing we can do, another attribute that an A tag has, just checking comments over here. Okay. Another attribute that the A tag has is the target attribute. And what we could say is that, hey, I don't want you to open this link inside of this page. I actually want you to open a new window. So as I go down here, there is a Visit Tech Elevator. So if I click on that, it opens up a new web page and goes to techelevator.com. So again, you'll see links that link within a web page, and you'll see links that link out to other web pages. So the next thing you'll see is we have this table here, and we have this space, and then we have this anchor tag. But it doesn't look like there's a space here. And the reason that is we could have all these spaces here. If I go ahead and save this, there's no more space in between the table and the tag. That normal white space is not interpreted by the browser. So if you want to be able to put a little bit of a break between something, we can use another tag called a line break. So just a BR, which is a self-closing tag. And if we clicked on here, we can see that there's a bunch of space there now. So we can actually put a bunch of these, and we can see a lot more space. Now, typically, you wouldn't use it in that fashion. If you wanted to line break in, say, a paragraph somewhere, you can use it there. If you wanted to control space between elements, like the table and the next line, which is the anchor tag, you could use CSS for that as well. But I just wanted to show off the line break. So something else that you would want to probably add to a web page is an image, right? So I want to display some images on my web page. Now, one thing that you have to be careful of when you're building your own web pages is where you find your images. So most people will go to Google, do a search, and then, oh, I found this cool image in an image search and I want to use it. We have to be very careful about that. There are rights to images on the internet, and you can't just grab any image that you like and go ahead and place it on a page. So you have to find some resources out there that offer Creative Commons rights to these images if you want to just use them on your web page. One of my favorite resources out there is a website called Unsplash. So the internet's source of freely usable images powered by creators everywhere. So this is really just vast collection of awesome images, especially high resolution images, backgrounds, whatever you want to use. So if you're looking for an image to add to your website, this is a really great place to start. So let's just go ahead and search for something. Let's say we wanted to search for code. So we could come in here, and there's all these different coding ones. If you wanted to say, grab this one, you can go ahead and download this and then use this in your project. Now over here on CodePen, I'm not really on my local machine. So if I were to download that image, there isn't a way for me to use it here. Luckily, CodePen gives us a way to kind of add images from Unsplash. So if I go in here and I go to assets and I go over to photos, I can do a search for photos. So I'm going to search for code. And let's just find a cool image. I kind of like this one. So if we go ahead and click on this little arrow here, we can copy the URL. We can actually copy the image tag if we wanted to, or we can copy it as a background. So I'm just going to copy the URL for a minute so you can see me type this out. But here we're going to use a new tag called the image tag. And remember before I said there is a source attribute of an image tag, which allows us to define where the image is stored. Again, if you're working locally on your computer, this may be in a folder somewhere. But when we're working here on CodePen, I'm going to directly reference that image that's over on Unsplash. So I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to go ahead and close that tag. And now we can see that image is located here. So there is a difference. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, but there is something known as a block level element and an inline element. So these heading tags are block level elements. So when we have these up here and we have H1, H2, these are meant to take up the entire width that they can take up. So that's why these are always on new lines. These inline elements, like a link and an image, are meant to just take up the space that they need to take up. So again, if you wanted to go ahead and add some break here, if you wanted to add a break from the anchor link to the images, you can paste in these break tags, these line breaks, and now we get a break from the tag down to our image. No reason. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this on screen. You mentioned RE break, line break. At the end, I have a question about what other options you mentioned. RE break, line break. Okay, we can, yeah, let's talk about it again. So those are, to be honest, probably a lot of the most common tags that you'll use. There are other tags that you'll see when it comes to structuring your content, like a div, like a span. And there are these things called HTML5 semantic elements, which are really just meant to tell the developer and what kind of content is going in there. So we have things like header and footer, but I'm not going to get into those today. I think we can take a look at those in a separate live session because there's a lot to kind of cover there. So the next thing I want to talk about is, all right, we've looked at some of the basic tags. How in the world can I remember all of these, or remember like what tags are available to me, what attributes are inside of each of those tags. And the one thing I'm going to mention today is the MDN documentation. So MDN stands for Mozilla Developer Network. And again, if you're just getting started, you're not going to remember all these tags. You're not going to remember all these attributes. So you'll need something to reference. And this link is really good. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. So go ahead and save this off if you can do that. And there's a lot of information of getting started, all the different HTML tags, attributes. This really gets you started with everything that we are talking about today. So I would take a look at this documentation if you want to after the fact, and this will help you kind of start to build your web pages. Like I said, you're not going to remember all this. There are even attributes that 20 years later I don't remember, so it's always nice to have a reference to kind of look up to. So those are the basics of HTML. I'm going to jump into just the basics of CSS real quick. So I'm going to save this off. I'm going to create a new pen. So I want to just quickly cover the basics of CSS, and then we're actually going to build a little project together. So basics of CSS. And so again, we're not going to use JavaScript here, but I am going to use CSS. Just a question in the chat. I'm learning other languages. Is there a similar page for other languages? For sure. So it really depends on what language you're learning, but MDN, yeah, so Beth answered. Really good answer there, Beth. So MDN is really focused on kind of front end stuff, but if you're learning like Python, there's the Python documentation. That's really an open question, but yes, to answer that, there is really great documentation out there for a lot of the languages that you're using today. So basics of CSS. So let's just say that I have that H1 back here and we see hello world. So as I said, by default, we are going to get this font size that's pretty big, and it's just by default some color which looks like a black color. So if we wanted to go ahead and change that color, we could. We can come into CSS and we start with what's called a rule. So a CSS rule always has a selector, and this selector is defining which HTML elements that we want to target. So in our case, we're saying, hey, any H1 that has been defined on this page, I want you to apply these rules to. Now, each selector has a bunch of different properties and values that we can define from. So one of the things that we can define is we want to say that I want the color of this to be blue. So now we can use a wide range of colors there, but I'm using just a blue. You can also use, you'll see RGBA colors, you'll see hexadecimal colors, you'll see some weird things in there when it comes to colors and background colors, but you can also use just a bunch of string names, names for colors. So now if I put another one on the page, that's another H1, I can see that I have another H1 that is blue. Now if I come on here and put an H2 tag, so this is a heading 2, we can see that this particular tag is not going to be blue, and that's because our CSS selector is only targeting our H1. We could, however, come in here and say, hey, for both H1 and H2s, I want you to go ahead and be blue. So remember when I said that there's a page structure going on here, that we haven't defined all of that. There is a body tag, and so that most of the outside page structure has been defined for us by CodePen, but there is something called the body, and if we wanted to, we can come into the body tag, we can target the body, and we can say, hey, I want you to go ahead and I want you to create a background for this entire page, and I want you to give it a color of light blue. So now you can see we have this nice light blue background. So that's pretty cool. Also, we can start to use some fancy styling techniques if we wanted to like position things. So if we wanted to say, hey, let's go ahead and change this to a dark blue. And if you wanted to, you can use CSS to go ahead and position things. So if I wanted to say, hey, I want this to be in the center of the page, I can do something like this and say center, center. So now that places it in the center if we have so first I'm telling this, hey, I'm going to give you a width and a height of the entire page here. So now we have our hello world, which is our heading one in the middle of our page. So I don't want to get too far into CSS because I think we can spend a couple live sessions on the basics of CSS and how to use it. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let us know. We can dive into that. I just wanted to get the point across that really HTML is for the structure of our page. CSS is the way that we kind of style it and make things look nice. So with that, I'm going to jump into a new project real quick. So we're going to create one more pen here. I'm going to save this. And we're going to call this Ethan's Landscaping Business. So I have this friend, Ethan, and he needs a new page for his landscaping business. Ethan does a great job, and we want to help Ethan out here today and create a web page for him. So we just want a simple landing page. When you hear the word landing page, it really just means like, hey, this is a one page that we want to really focus in on some content here. And so in this page today, I want to have some images of work that Ethan's done before, maybe some services that he offers, and maybe some contact information if you're interested in maybe talking to Ethan about a quote. So I think what we'll do is we always kind of start out with the structure of our document, where we want to make sure that we have all the content on our page first, and then we can come back and kind of clean things up and make it look pretty. So I'm going to start with a heading 1 tag, and I'm going to say this is Ethan's Landscaping Business. And what I'm going to do here is just put 3 paragraphs of text. Now I'm going to just, instead of you watching me type out text or copy and paste in, I'm going to go ahead and create 3 paragraphs with that placeholder lorem ipsum text. So again, it's just some placeholder text here. So I have a heading 1 and I have 3 paragraphs. So Ethan's Landscaping Business is starting to take shape. Now let's say that I wanted to offer some services. So I'm going to have a new heading. So there is some structure to this. So I have an H1 which defines like the top level heading. Now the next heading is for services. So if I wanted to lay out a list of services, can anyone in the chat tell me what HTML tag I might use to list out some services here? And while you guys are thinking about that, I'm going to bring on a question here. Oops, that's the wrong one. How do you get the closing tags to automatically appear as you're typing opening tags in CodePen? I have to type mine. So yes, so first off, this is a feature of CodePen, but this is also a feature you can get locally when you're working on your own machine. So in something like Visual Studio Code, there are plugins or extensions that do this for you. One of which, I don't know if you saw before when I typed P times 3 bracket lorem, and it just created 3 paragraphs of text for me. This is something called Emmet, E-M-M-I-T, or is it E-M-M-E-T? Emmet, and that really gives you the ability to not have to type all those out. It's definitely a shortcut, and it really helps out one of the things I always suggest to people is really getting familiar with your local tools. So my plan is to do that in a future live session here, is to install Visual Studio Code and really get familiar with it, because the more that you can take advantage of those shortcuts that really help you, they're just a productivity time saver. So definitely look into those. So I have some answers in there. UL, OL, ordered list, LI. So cool, all good answers. In this case, I don't think I have a specific order to the services that I'm offering. So I'm going to use an unordered list. So I'm going to say UL. And as somebody said, LI is what we use to list out all of the different list items. So LI stands for list item. So I'm going to type in a list item. And I'm going to say we offer lawn maintenance. We offer landscape design and installation. Maybe some outdoor lighting. I definitely need that. That would be awesome. What else? We can offer irrigation systems. Fun fact, in a previous life, I was a landscaper. So snow removal and plowing. I did not like plowing. That was not fun. Okay, so we have our unordered list here, and now here we are displaying some services. So if someone's interested in Ethan's landscaping, they know what services Ethan is offering now. So the next thing we can do is we can go ahead and we can display, let's actually close this for now. We want to go ahead and display some work that we've done. So maybe we want to say, hey, this is work that we've done before. So if I want to display some text, if I just want to put some text in here that says, here are a few images of work that we've done before. What HTML tag would I use to display some text? P tag. Thank you. Nice answer. Got it. So let's go ahead and use that. So P. And I'm going to go say, here are a few images of work we have done. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and display some images. So I could just type in the image tag and then the location. But what I'm going to do is actually come into this assets here in CodePen. And I'm going to go ahead and find some photos. So let's go ahead and say lawn. See if there's any good images of a lawn. Ooh, I like that one. I'm going to copy the image tag as a small image, because if you get the big one, it's a very large image. It would like run out our entire page here. So I'm just going to go ahead and, I don't know why that didn't copy. Let's go ahead and try that again. Lawn. This one looks good. Let's go ahead and copy image as full. You can see URL copied to clipboard. So now we can just go ahead and paste it in here. And I'm just using Control V, Command V on the Mac to go ahead and paste this out. So I'm going to do that 2 more times. I'd like to get a few more images of our work on this page. I like this one. And let's get one more. Okay, so now I have 3 images here. And actually they are different sizes, which is good. Although for this example, we should probably find another one that is kind of like this. Let me just find a different image. So we could spend an hour talking about images on the web. So let's see if we can just find lawn mower maybe. Ooh, I like this one. Let's go with that. Okay, so now we have our work. We have a few images of our work, and you'll see as we start to stretch this out, they may fit on here, they may not fit on here. And that's just the images taking up the width of what they are. So we'll come back to that in a second. So the next thing that we might want to do is have some testimonials on here. So I have an H2 with testimonials, and I may have some paragraph here. So what people are saying about Ethan's landscaping. So below that, I want to go ahead and include some quotes from customers of Ethan's Landscaping. And to do so, I'm going to use another HTML tag. Does anybody know what tag I can use to display a quote? Block quote. Awesome, nice answer. So yeah, so we're going to use a block quote here. So I'm going to come in here and say block quote, and then I'm just going to type in some text here, and I'm going to close this off with our closing tag, and there's our quote. So now we have a testimonial from someone saying how great Ethan's landscaping service is. So I'm going to actually copy this down and paste it one more time. So now we have 2 quotes. So finally, I'm going to create one more. I'm going to call this a contact us. So I want to have some contact information on this page. And I'm going to have a paragraph that says, please feel free to give us a call or email us to request a quote, right? So now below this, I'm going to have another paragraph, and inside of this paragraph, I'm going to use a strong tag, which will kind of give us that bold look. And I'm going to say our phone number is, so that's our phone number. And then I'm going to have another paragraph tag with some strong tags inside of it that says email address. And inside of there, I'm going to have Ethan at ethanslandscaping.com. So one more thing to kind of highlight this off is we have this Ethan's email address here, but you can see that you can't click on it. I'd like to be able to just click on that and have that open up in my email, my default email editor, so that I can send Ethan an email. So we can use the anchor tag. So one of those attributes for the anchor tag, remember, was href. So if we wanted to, we can use that for more than just a link to another website. We can go ahead and say that I want this to mail to Ethan at ethanslandscaping.com. So now you'll see a link for Ethan's Landscaping down here, and if we were to click on this in the real world, it would open up in, for me, Gmail, and allow me to go ahead and send something off to Ethan. So that is the default page for our landscaping page. So we have our title, we have some paragraph text that just kind of talks about Ethan's landscaping. We have some services offered, so we're using an unordered list here to define some services. We have some our work here. We have a few of our images at work. We have some testimonials, and then we have some contact us. So what I'm going to do is actually copy and paste some CSS in here because we are running out of time here. So I don't want to, I know we said an hour, so I don't want everybody to go over too far. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste in some CSS. And this is going to give our page a look and feel. So let's go ahead and remove that. So as I said before, CSS allows us to target specific elements on the page. So we know that the entire page is included inside of a body tag. So we said, hey, I want the entire page to have a background of light green. For the H1, H2, and H3, I want a nice border on the bottom that is white. I want a line height. I'm basically changing like the space between our paragraph tags. The images I've made a little bit smaller by targeting them and saying I want those only to be 200 pixels wide, and I want a little bit of margin in between those. And then the block quotes I want to stand out a little bit more, so I pumped up the font size of them, gave them that little border, and put some padding in between the border and the text. And that really makes them kind of stands out and says, hey, these are some great things that Ethan's Landscaping is doing. That is our Ethan's Landscaping business. And again, I wanted to get into more CSS stuff, but we just don't have the time today. We can definitely go into that in another session if that's something that you're interested in. But I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my camera. And again, apologize if there's any lag here, but I'd like to open it up for questions now. Do you guys have any questions about, oops, we have, sorry about that. My audio should be back. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so question. This has been great. Thank you very much, Thrive. How do you scale? So here's a good question. How do you scale for mobile devices and tablets? So this is definitely something that you need to be thinking of today when you're building websites or web pages. And the term for this is called responsive design. So when we often build pages, you have to think of this. You have to think of how is my customer or how is my user going to see this content if they pull it up on a mobile phone or a tablet. And so there are ways to do this. There are ways to say that, like, hey, when we are shrinking the page, I want you to use the layout items in a page and I want you to shrink with them. So when we get into CSS layouts with things like CSS Grid and Flexbox, there are ways to make those responsive and target different breakpoints in the browser. And what I mean by a breakpoint is there are some common sizes, like most phones fit into this size. You can't target every phone because that would just be a lot of work, but there are certain phones, most phones in a landscape or in a vertical position are a certain size. So you can say, hey, when the user is scaling down their web browser, whether they're moving it manually or they're on a phone, let's go ahead and do these different things. Like I want you to stack these things on top of each other, or I want you to make the images a little bit smaller, or maybe even hide certain content on certain forms. So responsive design is definitely something you have to think about. So I would say learn the basics of web development first, learn the tags, learn some CSS, and that is then the next step is like, okay, how do I scale this for different devices? So what other options you mentioned are a BR line break? I missed what you said. So when it comes to line breaks, so a line break is just meant to put a break in between something that is not a block level element. So in the case of two images are meant to display inline. If you wanted a break in between them, you could go ahead and put the line break tag in there to say, hey, move my image down to the next line. When we get into CSS though, there are ways to say, hey, I want you to, for every image, I want you to have it act like a block level element and take up the width. Or you could say, hey, I want you to go ahead and have the margin on this a certain way. So maybe I want these two things to be separated by 20 pixels of margin. So to directly answer your question, it really depends on the different elements that are being placed on the page. I would go ahead and look at CSS things like really understanding the difference between block level elements and inline elements, and then understanding the different properties that you can use inside of your CSS classes to define margin and padding. James, awesome. Thank you. No, thank you, James. I appreciate it. Yep, so CSS can control a lot of that. CSS can do some really great things with. Just whenever you're looking, spend some time today. If you're just like browsing the internet today and you see some just some really beautiful pages out there, most of the time, these web designers out there are just amazing. They can put together these really nice designs, and using a combination of images, typography, and some CSS, you can create these really great experiences on a web page for users. All right, so we've gone a little bit over. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and end this. But if you have any more questions, please go ahead and reach out to us. Again, my email address is dan@techelevator.com. We would love some suggestions on future live coding sessions that you'd like to see. So please go ahead and do that. Also, I have a couple of next steps, actually. So first off, some advice. If you want to learn how to code, you really need to you need to code. So I know that sounds kind of silly, but you can watch all the YouTube videos out there, read all of the articles that you can find, but you can't get caught up in reading and watching. You need to spend time doing, because the most valuable lessons for me throughout my career have been actually doing something, failing at it, and then learning how to do it correctly. So, go through the tutorials, but then really take the time to practice what you've learned. So take what you've learned here today and really start going with it. And then I also want to say that if this session sparked your interest in learning how to code and maybe landing a career in tech, I encourage you to check out a link that I'm going to go ahead and throw in the comments or in the description below, actually. It's basically an overview of Tech Elevator along with a link to our aptitude test, which is a quick way to find out if you have what it takes to have a career in coding. So check out that link below. I have also included some resources here. So two of my favorite resources for learning HTML and CSS are free Code Camp's responsive web design certification and Code Academy's learn how to build websites. So I've included those. Those are both free to use. Go ahead and check out those if you're interested. Any other font resource sites besides Google Fonts? No, I pretty much stick to Google Fonts myself. There are fonts that you can buy out there, but as far as free fonts go, no. Well, I'll take that back. I do have the Adobe Creative Suite subscription. Again, that's paid, but as part of that, there is a font library on there as well. Really like the CodePen setup. Going to start using it right away. Thank you. Awesome. Me too. I love CodePen. It's a really great way, no friction way to get started, and I really like doing that. Not only that, but then you can take that and share that with me, and I can take a look at it and go, oh, why is this not working? Maybe you're just missing something there. So it's a really great way to quickly get something up and collaborate with somebody else. Cool. All right, so thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and let me know any suggestions that you'd like to see for future live coding sessions. Again, this was Tech Elevator Live, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Have a great day.